Sam Harris books have been bestsellers like The End of Faith and Letters to a Christian Nation. Sam Harris is here at the TED Conference in Long Beach. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Pat.
What brings you here? What message are you delivering today to this group?
Well, actually, I was talking not so much about religion, but about morality and how we can understand morality and human values through science. Now, this has a somewhat ulterior motive because actually, when you talk to people about religion and you ask them why they believe in God or why they think other people should believe in God or have to believe in God, this morality issue is the first thing to come up. I mean, most people think that there is just no other way to anchor our moral concerns but for religion. You know, the only universal version of morality is one given to us by religion and anchored to the claim that the creator of the universe dictated one or another of our books. And so I think that's fundamentally untrue, and I think if you could actually dislodge this belief, you would really move the conversation forward on religion quite substantially. But I wasn't talking so much on that subject. I was just talking about how once you see that morality and values really relate to questions of human and animal well-being, then you see that falls squarely in the purview of science. And insofar as we understand well-being, we will understand values and morality.
The idea of an enlightened self-interest for the well-being, the health of the planet, the health of the ecosystem.
Yeah, and perhaps there are many different possibilities that are. I spoke with reference to something I call the moral landscape, which is really the space of all possible experiences that we can have given the way the universe is, however it is. This is not just talking about human beings, this is talking about any conscious system. And clearly, consciousness admits of changes in well-being. This is true of animals that can suffer, and this is true, obviously, of human beings that can suffer, we think, quite a bit more greatly. And how to move in that space is there are right and wrong answers to how to move. I mean, if we're going to ask ourselves, well, how are we going to lift people out of poverty, or how are we going to educate the most number of children, or how are we going to get ourselves to be most resistant to disease, those clearly all have right answers, those questions. And so that's, once again, then we're in the domain of facts, and that's where science is so strong. And yet there's this myth that science will never give us answers to moral questions. Right?
How, to be kind of crass about it, what is the sales job we do with ourselves as a species that makes this zero-sum, that if you are not religious, you cannot be moral?
Well, it's just a dogma that is ceaselessly reiterated in the echo chamber of religion. And this is what religious people tell themselves all day long about non-religion. If you lose your faith, there's no reason not to murder your neighbor. I mean, I was in a debate with Rick Warren for Newsweek, and he said, if I didn't believe that Jesus was the risen Lord, I'd waste no time being good. I would just
really,
yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, I don't think it's actually true. I think it's sort of a canned line he uses. But I don't think he would, I don't think he's a psychopath. I don't think he would run around killing people.
So what did he say was keeping you from murdering him?
Well, very good question. That's what I asked. And, needless to say, I think that was a winning point.
And you took a step back?
He said you have natural grace or some such nonsense. But the point is, we are deeply social creatures, and we have spent the last 200,000 years more or less the way we are, and millions of years prior to that, negotiating this kind of harrowing encounter with our fellow creatures, which is intrinsically social and intrinsically non-zero sum. I mean, we have to cooperate in order to thrive. And this is not to say that all morality and well-being reduces to an evolutionary description. I mean, most of evolution can't see human well-being as we now define it. I mean, there's nothing about evolution that has wired us to build stable democracies or contain nuclear proliferation or educate ourselves well. I mean, this is stuff we need to do because it is good for us, because more people will be better off if we do it. But evolution is blind to those concerns. Evolution just wants us to successfully procreate and raise our grandchildren to procreate, and then we can shove off
the selfish gene,
yeah,
or some version of that. And yet there's a sense that faith is almost, we were just talking about genetics, that faith is almost genetically encoded in us, some need for that, and that religion, structured religion, overlays that, organizes it, focuses it, or doesn't, but that this is innate to our nature.
Yeah, well, I think that can be oversold. I don't think faith is distinct from belief in general, and some of the neuroimaging work I've done on belief bears this out, which is to say that when we scanned fundamentalist Christians and atheists in the same paradigm, looking at beliefs, religious beliefs, Jesus was born of a virgin, and non-religious beliefs about tables and chairs, the same regions of the brain were reporting belief versus disbelief, and so I think belief is in some important sense content independent, and what we do is we constantly represent reality in our thoughts and in our conversations with one another, and we take these representations on as guides for living, guides to our emotion, guides to our economic behavior. If the fire marshal ran into this room and said, this building is about to collapse, that's just a sentence. That's just a string of words spoken into our ears, but the moment we believe it, we all of a sudden are moving out the door, and it's our day has changed, and so that's the way our minds work with respect to language and this ability we have to let language stand in as a surrogate for experience. And religion is just one part of that language game. And now there are other issues where people are maybe predisposed to be superstitious. We're clearly able to have extraordinary experiences, love and self-transcending love, and mystical experiences, and all of that is how that links up with evolution is another question. But we have a plasticity to our neurology such that experience can change in many different ways, and religion traditionally has just been the only way of talking about certain kinds of experiences.
You've got a PhD in neuroscience. You were talking about the brain scans. I wonder if you were to take a profoundly believing person and an atheist and put them in the same visual situation, a child about to be hit by a truck, if the response would be the same: get the child, save the child.
Right.
And that's seen as a moral question. A perfectly selfish person wouldn't bother risking his own life by trying to save the child. Is there experimentation being done along these lines that puts that brain on the same platform?
I'm not aware of neuroimaging work that's looking at just that question, but there's been a vast amount of survey work where you get tens of thousands of people online to answer moral questions, and I think Mark Hauser has been doing most of this work. And from what I hear, I don't think this has been published yet, but from what he's told me, there's no religion is irrelevant to the way people answer those questions. Clearly, we don't have to do any experiments to know that we don't really get our morality from religion, because, one, you go to these scriptures that are supposedly these great repositories of of moral wisdom, and you see that we have to pick and choose. I mean, you're supposed to kill your children for talking back to you, and if you read Leviticus and Exodus. Slavery is justified throughout the Bible, so we recognize those passages are not moral, and we ignore them, and then we look at the golden rule and we say, well, this is really wise. This is really the jewel in the dunghill here. Let's keep that. We are taking a moral apparatus to the text. We're not getting it from the text. And clearly,
the observer is changing the thing observed.
Yeah, well, we have to pick and choose, because most of it is just inapplicable.
Yet there are still so many efforts to reconcile the science and the faith. Francis Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for work on the structure of DNA, wrote a book called The Scientific Search for the Soul. It was really trying to come to some scientific evidence or finding that would explain this, for want of another word, human spark.
Yeah, although the answer he came to was even more reductionistic and materialistic than I would be comfortable with. I mean, he basically said, you are what your brain is doing, and ultimately this will be fully captured in brain talk. Now, I think we are what our brains are doing, but I think it's the philosophical and conceptual problems in talking about ourselves merely in terms of physical events are quite a bit harder than Crick and many people on his side of the debate were acknowledging. And I think that they're really correlating mind and brain, or consciousness and brain, is not really truly a reductive thing to do in the end. I mean, a relationship of identity, if love is really just a certain brain state, knowing that about it doesn't change the subjective component of love, and you can't throw out the subjective component and say, well, it's really just dopamine or oxytocin or neurons in this state, because it's only that by virtue of the subjective component being correlated with it. If they were no longer correlated, we would have a different the reduction wouldn't run through. So I don't think we're ever, there's nothing understanding ourselves in greater detail at the level of the brain does not eradicate the mystery of our subjective experience.
Sam Harris is my guest here at the TED Conference, the author of such books as The End of Faith, Letters to a Christian Nation. We'll come back and talk more about faith versus religion, about the idea of religion as a function of human society, and exactly what atheism is and what it isn't, the myths about atheism, when we come back here at 89.3 KPCC, Southern California Public Radio. I'm Patt Morrison at the TED Conference in Long Beach, talking to Sam Harris, the author of such books as The End of Faith, Letters to a Christian Nation. His forthcoming book is The Moral Landscape. Was reading about you that you had been on the Dalai Lama's security team. Is that virtual muscle or?
Well, it was ineffective muscle. Actually, that was just for 3 weeks. I was part of a group that, ironically, he had real French Secret Service security bodyguards, and then he had this phalanx of poorly trained Buddhist sympathizers who they put between them and the rascal mob. And so we actually got into a much more conflict with the world than the real bodyguards.
It was good cop, bad cop, but the casting was a little
very inelegant, and my French is terrible and not up to being diplomatic. So,
what about organized religion? Is it harmless? Is it harmful? What is your sense of it?
Oh, I think it's truly harmful because it's the only area in our lives where people win points for pretending to know things they clearly do not know, and these are things these are not just these are things that are absolutely at the core of our decision-making process about the most important questions in human life. And this is how to educate children, what sort of medical research to do, what sort of wars to fight. What is worth dying for? I mean, these are the huge questions of life. And when the stakes get really, really high, people have convinced themselves that knowledge doesn't apply anymore and evidence doesn't apply, and you can actually pretend to know things no human being could possibly know, like the creator of the universe is behind America in our current foreign policy, or you pick your insane comment from the Bush era, and not only is that, do they get a pass for doing that? In fact, if they didn't do that, they couldn't possibly assume power. In to speak specifically of the United States, I mean, unless you pretend that we are sort of potentially in dialogue with an omniscient creator who's kind of watching out for us in some basic sense, you can't be elected in this country, and that's it's bad, one, because it's almost certainly untrue, and it's intrinsically divisive because we have all of these religions in the world that are in principle incompatible. I mean, there's just no way to square Islam and Christianity, really, when you look at the details.
Why not?
Because they make mutually incompatible claims about the nature of reality. To take one, which is the true deal breaker, every Christian, every really legitimate Christian, thinks that believing in the divinity of Jesus is the core of Christianity. I mean, if you think Jesus was just an ordinary guy, you're not a Christian. I mean, maybe you're a Unitarian, but you have to believe in the divinity of Jesus. Well, it says twice in the Quran that if you believe in the divinity of Jesus, you're going to go to hell for eternity. So, I mean, this offers about as much room for compromise as a coin toss. And this is where most Christians and most Muslims are located in their beliefs. Now, we have a lot of smart, well-intentioned people pretending that the world isn't like that. You have people like Karen Armstrong, who's the winner of the previous TED Prize, who is walking around saying, well, no, that's not what religion is at all. It's not about belief. It's about compassion. Every religion teaches compassion as the core teaching of every religion. It's just not true. And where they do teach compassion, they don't teach it equally well. And in the context of most religious belief systems, compassion means avoiding making sure your kid doesn't become a homosexual so he doesn't wind up in hell, etc. I mean, there's very weird versions of compassion. Now, if you want to argue that the best way forward is to pretend that all religion is really just about compassion, and then if we pretend hard enough, the world will change. Well, then that's an argument that I think is worth having. But most people don't seem to know that they're pretending.
They truly do believe in their own hearts that
religion is just about compassion.
And certainly you have people who have a kind of off-the-shelf religion. They may not go to church. You have Catholics who practice birth control, but who think that by being a Catholic or whatever denomination you want to cite, they're being better people. They stop when old ladies cross the street, and they hold doors open for people and give to help the poor. What's wrong with that?
Well, that may be true. There certainly may be instances where people are doing good within the context of their religious beliefs, and it might even be good they wouldn't be inclined to do otherwise. That may be true. The problem I have is that religion gives us bad reasons to be good where good reasons are actually available. I mean, we don't need, it's possible to believe something on no evidence and to lie to yourself and to lie to your children and have that belief system be something that sort of points you in a benign direction. That's possible. But there's so many good reasons to be good. Like really caring about other people. I mean, which is better, going to Haiti because you really want to help people because you're moved by their suffering, or going to Haiti because you sort of want to help people, but you also just want to save souls, and you think that the gates of hell await those who don't call God by the right name.
Does it matter if the end result is the same?
Well, I think the end result is almost never the same, and that's the problem. That's why you have missionaries in sub-Saharan Africa who are feeding people, but then sometimes feeding people contingent upon their denomination. They first have to be Christians, or they spend half their time ministering to them, spreading the gospel rather than educating them, or they speak against condom use in areas being ravaged by AIDS. And so this is where religious ignorance and dogmatism interact in a very perverse and dangerous way with arguably genuinely philanthropic impulses. I don't. It's not a lot of bad people in the world intentionally doing bad. There's a lot of good people who believe silly things that have been drummed into them since they were on mother's knee, and that we have a culture that has refused to criticize these things. And so we have good people who are really worried about they really think gay marriage is the greatest problem of the 21st century because homosexuality is something that the creator of the universe doesn't approve of. So now we live in a culture that talks about gay marriage and doesn't talk about genocide or nuclear proliferation or any other hugely consequential problem.
There is in this country in particular, and certain classes of people attend from organized religion just to faith, the idea that I believe in God, there are no tenets, there's no dogma. Right. What about that?
Well, then let's just be honest about what that is. That is religion having suffered the hammer blows of modernity such that most of its tenets are indefensible now. So when you open the Bible as that kind of Christian, you say, well, yeah, of course I don't believe he was literally resurrected, and of course I don't believe the universe is 6,000 years old, and of course. And so then what are you left with? You're left with this kind of vague sense of I'm still attached to my denomination. I don't want to admit that I wasted any time in church. And I have these experiences that I have no other way of talking about. I feel great when I'm in a church. I love the silence. I love the music. I love the community. Well, that's all fine, but clearly there are ways to talk about those experiences that are compatible with rationality.
Is it zero-sum then? Because you make religion at this point, organized religion, when confronted with these realities, sound like a boxer backed into a corner, crouched down with his gloves over his face. Is this really?
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, I meet that boxer rather often, and whether it's emails that are written in all capital letters or in public debate.
That's always a clue, isn't it?
Yeah, it is always a clue. But it's a yeah. I mean, these are the most important issues that people face in their lives. And there's also this massive issue of sunk costs. I mean, people don't want to admit that they have taught their children the wrong thing or that they have wasted time. I meet people.
It's like investing in Bernie Madoff?
Yeah, well, but without, it's possible to continue in your self-deception. I mean, when Madoff really loses all your money, then there's a reckoning. But here, this reckoning doesn't come until after death for people. So it's you can really just persist in not being honest with yourself.
What is it about atheism that attracts even more hostility from religious people than members of other religions?
Well, atheism has terrible PR for one. I mean, it's sort of, but I think it's understandable. Atheism, from my point of view, is something we never have to espouse. Atheism isn't an ideology. It isn't a belief system. It's just not being convinced by the claims of religious people. So we're all atheists with respect to Poseidon and thousands of other dead gods. And so all an atheist is... You
just alienated all the Poseidon believers out there.
Yeah, I've actually, strangely enough, I've gotten emails from people who do believe in Poseidon.
They got the trident after you.
Yeah. But so most of us don't believe in Poseidon. Most of us would be horrified to think that important decisions are being made with reference to some lines in Ovid's Metamorphoses or some other book that mentions Poseidon. I mean, that would be an absolutely bizarre world to live in, and yet we live in that world with respect to the God of Abraham. So the God of Abraham has exactly the same status as Poseidon. Now, obviously, most Christians and Jews and Muslims would disagree, but then most Christians look at Islam as just a tissue of self-deception and unjustified belief. Most Christians are not losing sleep about whether to convert to Islam. They view Islam the way I view Islam, and Muslims return the favor. So these faiths are mutually nullifying, and it's just obvious that whatever is true in them, these remarkable experiences that people have, experiences of devotion and self-transcending love, ethical impulses, a desire for community, whatever is true there is clearly deeper than any specific denomination, because people in every denomination experience it, and even atheists experience it. And so we have to find a way to talk about that transcends denomination. We just don't have a right to be provincial anymore. I mean, the boundaries between people have broken down so totally that our world is just being continually shattered and reshattered with each generation by these dogmatic doctrines.
What would a secular world look like? A world of agnostics or atheists? A world without organized religion, or even dis or unorganized religion?
Well, it's a world that we've achieved in so many other respects. I mean, when you look at science, science is this discourse that transcends nationality. It transcends any kind of parochialism. There's no difference between American science and German science or Japanese science. And I think once we get straight about what morality is, and once we get straight about what even spiritual experience is, we will see that there's no such thing as Christian morality versus Muslim morality, or Christian spiritual experience versus Buddhist spiritual experience. There's just the capacity of the human mind to experience various states of consciousness. There's the effect of different behaviors on that capacity, the way we treat each other, the way we think about each other, the way we talk to each other, the economic systems in which we arrange our behavior with each other. All of that affects our well-being, and yet none of that is best captured by Iron Age language as it has survived in our holy books.
What happens to that impulse where faith would go now? Voltaire's line about if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. Would people not create something in its place?
Well, some people might. I just think it's a little bit like, I mean, when I hear that question, it's exactly like asking, well, what would we do without witchcraft? I mean, nobody's really worrying about that. But
we wouldn't have Harry Potter.
Well, I'm talking about real witchcraft. I mean, which
you mean it's not real?
Well, no, but if you go to Africa, people still believe in witchcraft. There are, for instance, albinos in Africa are being hunted because people think that albino body parts have magical properties. So, fishermen are trying to get albino hair to put in their nets to catch more fish. Now, we look at this belief system, and that's completely insane, obviously. Sympathetic magic is insane, and yet it has millions and millions of subscribers. No one is sitting here saying, well, that's giving these people so much meaning, it seems indecent to criticize it. We'll never get rid of it. Now, witchcraft, just like religion, has been a cultural universal. Every culture you look at has got these magical beliefs.
You could put a ladder out in the hallway and people would walk around it so as not to walk under it, right here.
Yeah, so we have this residue of superstition. But it's not that long ago. We believe in the Merck manual. I think 1906, you could still buy mummy paint, which was ground up mummy parts, and it's rumored that Abraham Lincoln, as he lay dying on the sidewalk, had mummy paint applied to him.
Actually, he was in a bed in a boarding house, but I get your point.
Okay, wherever they finally had his body prostrate, they tried to they broke out a little mummy, as a last ditch effort. That's laughable now. But so that to go back to your question, the idea that somehow we might not outgrow that now seems unthinkable. Of course, we're going to outgrow witchcraft. We have almost everywhere in the developed world. I think religion, certainly faith-based religion of a sort that is ubiquitous now, is going to look a lot like that at some point. It's just the idea that people could really believe that they're going to get 72 virgins in paradise if they blow themselves up in the right circumstance is going to look properly insane, as indeed it is, and yet there are millions upon millions of people in the Muslim world who think that is actually metaphysically likely to be true, whether or not they themselves would be suicide bombers.
It sounds like you think it's time for some constructive intolerance.
Yeah, I essentially I call it conversational intolerance. It's not the intolerance that gave us the gulag. It's not the intolerance that would have people locked up, but it's the intolerance of smart people not to keep a straight face when other smart people are obviously espousing stupid, vacuous statements about the nature of the universe. And so when the president stands up, to take one recent and I think scandalously unobserved example, we have a liberal president who is against gay marriage because his faith tells him so. Now, what does that mean, and how are we all just remaining polite in the face of that? I mean, he's obviously an exquisitely reasonable and smart person. It's profoundly ironic that the African American community is the most homophobic community in this country, given their history of oppression.
Do you think that's the case, that they are?
Oh yeah, that's well established that they are. And it arguably was a political necessity for Obama not to come out in favor of gay marriage. I mean, he arguably would not have gotten elected, so it's politically pragmatic. But now to say, my faith tells me this is not right, that can't stand in for moral discourse now. Certainly not with the best and the brightest people standing up in front of the White House press corps talking. And so I think we need a journalist who will stand up and say, what could you possibly mean? I mean, Leviticus tells us not to eat shrimp. That's a killing offense. We're not working on this. This is the same faith that would have us not work on the Sabbath. So it's just, anyway, you got me on a rant in defense of
your rants
gay
are
friends.
Always entertaining. Sam Harris, I hope you will come back. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, really a pleasure to meet you.
Sam Harris, the author of The End of Faith and the forthcoming book, The Moral Landscape. He is here at the TED Conference, as are we. When we come back, we're going to be hearing from the founder of the World Wide Web and talking about breakthroughs in AIDS research for a vaccine and really how a lot of mythology about AIDS, HIV is holding back progress in combating that disease. This is 89.3 KPCC, Southern California Public Radio.
Programming.